This is one of a series of Good Answers presentations, offering evidence to answer skeptical challenges to the Bible's accuracy. Today, we look to the Pool of Bethesda in ancient Jerusalem. It has been a source of puzzlement to biblical students over the years for two quite different reasons. Those who view the Bible with a critical eye see the account of the pool in John chapter 5 as providing just two more examples of the errors in the Scriptures. And those who are inclined to trust the biblical narrative have suffered some embarrassment. Let's see if we can uncover some of the answers about Bethesda. Here's the account that we find in John's Gospel. Quote, "Now there is in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, a pool, in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, 'Do you want to be healed?' The sick man answered him, 'Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me.' Jesus said to him, 'Get up, take up your bed, and walk.' And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked." John 5, verses 2 through 9. Now, of course, we have here an example of Jesus' healing ministry. The Apostle Peter said of him that he went about doing good, and most everyone would agree with that judgment, even those who doubt his miraculous powers. But as we look beyond the personal encounter to its setting, a couple of oddities appear. First, we are told that this pool has 5 roofed colonnades. We might also call them porticos. In the Greek world, they were called stoas, a porch structure fronted by columns, and with a roof extending back to a wall or, in some cases, a row of rooms. Very popular in the Mediterranean climate, they provided shade and a place for gatherings. The shops at the back, which some had, rather like a strip mall, provided amenities for the populace. But a second thought about this phrase brings us up short. 5 roofed colonnades? How would they be arranged? A rectangular pool might be fully surrounded by porticos, but only 4 of them. Would the pool then have been a pentagon? That would accommodate the 5 structures all right, but did Jerusalem ever have a 5-sided pool? Not so far as we know. So how are we to understand the author's reference here? Commentators on the Scripture have had trouble with this detail, and may have been tempted to distrust it. One author, though, thought the phrase could be explained as an allegory. Quote, "The man stands for the people of Israel. The 5 porches stand for the 5 books of the law. In the porches, the people lay ill. The law could show a man his sin, but could never mend it. The law could uncover a man's weakness, but could never cure it. The law, like the porches, sheltered the sick soul, but could never heal it. The 38 years stand for the number of the centuries men had been waiting for the Messiah. The stirring of the waters stands for baptism." William Barclay reports this interpretation in his commentary on the Gospel of John, page 180. But fortunately, he doesn't endorse such an explanation. Maybe it would help if we could find the pool. Ancient Jerusalem was, it seems, a city of pools. Some of these were for basic water supply, a critical issue for a city located too high up to have a river at its gates. but other pools served the purpose of ritual purification. We will see more about that shortly. Well, for many years, people believed that this was the pool of Bethesda, just north of the great platform on which the temple had stood. But then, in the 1880s, archaeologists were able to identify it as the so-called Pool of Israel. Another pool, just a bit north of that one, is now agreed to be the Pool of Bethesda. Now, I had said that some of the pools in Jerusalem were reservoirs for basic water supply, but some were for ritual purification. That may require a bit of explanation. Perhaps you recall that the Jewish law code provided for the use of water in purification for the priests, and for others who might have acquired some kind of ritual uncleanness. Here are a few references. For consecration of the priests, you shall bring Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and wash them with water. Exodus 29:4. For the high priest, preparing to don his special vestments on the Day of Atonement, he shall bathe his body in water, and then put them on. Leviticus 16:4. And under certain conditions, any Jew would need ceremonial cleansing. If he had been healed of leprosy, bathe himself in water, and he shall be clean. Leviticus 14:8. Or, if they had experienced some unusual bodily discharge, bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening. Leviticus 15:6. Or if one had eaten any tainted food, he shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until evening. Leviticus 17:15. That was a pattern in the law, bathing for ritual purification. But tradition often grows up to elaborate on the law, and in the 2nd century B.C., the notion of ritual purity grew dramatically. The rabbinic history says, "Purity broke out in Israel." Very likely this was a result of the Jewish rebellion against Antiochus IV Epiphanes, that Greek ruler who tried to eradicate the Jewish faith. He had desecrated the temple, forbidden circumcision, confiscated copies of the law, and much more. Once the Maccabees had finally driven him out, they must have felt a special need to re-purify the nation. In any case, the practice arose of expecting all Jews in the holy city of Jerusalem to perform ritual purification on a regular basis. There's archaeological evidence of this. We find a new type of structure appearing beginning in the 2nd century B.C., a structure called the mikveh, or plural, mikvaot. It was a tub or pool for bathing to acquire ritual purification. Some were in private homes like these, whether recessed with steps leading down, or above floor level, also with steps. But many could not afford these private mikvaot, so communal ones were built as well. Here's one that might have been used by small groups, such as priests or Levites. And here, a huge one, the Pool of Siloam, for public use. Notice that it has a sequence of steps and landings, so that people can conveniently move down into it as far as desired, depending on the water level as well. Now we come to Bethesda. It's a complicated site, and only partly excavated. And to add to the difficulty, through the centuries it was built over repeatedly. This plan shows a bit of the history. First, the Romans built a medicinal bath structure here. That's shown in green. Then, the Byzantines placed a church on the site, shown here in red. And finally, in the Middle Ages, the Crusaders built a chapel over all. That's black in the plan. This photograph reveals traces of these various structures, and is hard to sort out for that reason. But underneath, as you can see, it is really two pools, separated by a wall or dam. And there lies the explanation for the 5 colonnades, one on each of the 4 sides, and a 5th one on the dam itself. So John had that detail right. But there's more here to sort out. The account in John's Gospel involves a second puzzle. Let's look again at what he says. Verse 3, "In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed." Verse 5, "One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. That's the English Standard Version. But wait, what has become of verse 4? It turns out that there is a textual problem here. Some other versions, like the King James, include it, and it reads like this: "For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool, and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in, was made whole of whatsoever disease he had." The fact is that many of the more modern translations omit verse 4, and for 2 reasons. The first is that the verse does not appear in the oldest and best Greek manuscripts we have. That suggests that it was not originally penned by John, but that some later copyist inserted it. The other reason is that the verse speaks of an angel doing something utterly unlike what angels regularly do in Scripture. They are messengers, are they not? Normally, they carry instructions from God. In some cases, such as with Sodom and Gomorrah, they also carry out some action God has assigned, such as rescuing Lot's family. But to come down and invisibly and anonymously stir up the water and initiate a competition to see who gets into the water first to be healed, that's not like them. And it makes sense then that the earliest manuscripts would not include the verse. John didn't write it because no angel was involved. But then, why would anyone add it to the text? I think we can see the reason. There is a later mention of the water being stirred up in verse 7. Jesus asks the man if he wants to be healed, and here's his response: "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm going, another steps down before me." The man obviously knew that the water was stirred from time to time, and the story was that the first person in would be healed. But follow me now as we sort this out. That mention of the stirring of the water is in the oldest manuscripts, and it calls for some kind of explanation. So at some time in the 4th or 5th century, some copyist felt the awkwardness and came up with the notion of the angel. He would probably have put the extra sentence in the margin, but marginal notes have a way of creeping into the text. That's especially easy in a medieval scriptorium, where the priest up front is simply reading the text aloud, and the copyists are writing it as they hear it. They don't see the text itself. Okay, so John didn't write anything about an angel. But then what was this business about the stirring of the water, and the idea that the first person in gets healed? A closer look at the structure of the pool of Bethesda will tell us. You see, the pool was a public mikveh. We can see this just by looking at a good photo of this portion of it. There is the dead giveaway. Steps, landing, steps, landing, steps. All public mikvaot are built this way for the convenience of the bathers. Reservoirs are not, because those steps and landings would reduce the reservoir's capacity and serve no purpose. And there is further evidence. Recall that Bethesda is actually 2 pools, separated by a dam. Only the southern pool is a mikveh, only it has steps. And why then have the other pool? To answer that, we need to know a bit more about ritual purification. Rabbinic tradition is quite clear on this point. A mikveh must contain pure water. That is, water that comes from the hand of God. So, either from rainwater or a stream, not drawn as from a well. But, with so many people entering the mikveh, eventually it becomes impure. How to restore it? Here's where it gets odd by our standards. Water in a mikveh can be restored to purity just by coming in contact with new, pure water. It doesn't have to be flushed out and totally refilled. Just the addition of some pure water restores it. That's the reason for the northern pool. It's a reservoir of pure water from God. The Jews would call that pool an otzer. Its contents can be used to refresh the mikveh. And that is just what the archaeologists found. There is a channel through the dam from the northern pool into the southern one, and it was provided with a water gate that Levites could open periodically to refresh the mikveh and make it good for purification again. Now, none of this conforms to our notions of hygiene. The Jews were talking about ritual purity, not avoiding germs. The content of the mikveh might have all kinds of contaminants in it, even after some pure water was run into it. But that pure water would make its entire contents ritually pure and effective for ritual cleansing. Do you see where this is going? Numbers of people use the public mikveh for ritual purification. After a time, there's a general sense that it's not pure anymore. So, the Levites go down into the manhole in the dam and open the water gate from the northern pool, the otzer. As that water rushes in, the surface is stirred, and the mikveh is usable again for a while, but only until too many people have used it again. So it is not very far from that to a notion that when the water is stirred, only the first person in will be purified. And from there, a legend grows to the idea that the first person in will be physically healed. That's what the lame man believed. And now we can see how the superstition would have arisen. From ritual purity to physical healing is only a small mental step, and it seems that the people had taken it. Well then, you can see why I invited you to take this little tour, so that we can appreciate Bethesda's contribution to our knowledge of truth on these 2 points. First, John tells us about a pool with 5 porticos, and Bethesda did indeed have them. The column bases for them are still there. And from time to time, the water was actually troubled, as the Levites opened the refreshment channel and fresh water poured in to restore the mikveh's purity. Seeing that process led to the superstition that the lame man had. Now, these are minor things, of course, but Bethesda also provides us with a major lesson. Never let a puzzling statement in the Bible cause you to doubt its truthfulness. If we don't know the explanation now, we can just wait a bit and let the archaeologists keep digging. The evidence they find down there will confirm our confidence in the Bible every time. If you have questions about this lecture, or any of the others in the Good Answers series, you may address them to me, Dr. Jerry C. 4 at yahoo.com.